Hey, welcome to episode 101 of the Golf Podcast. Last week, we celebrated the big 100. I can't thank everybody enough for everyone who's reached out to, just words of encouragement, support, congratulating us, whether it be on Twitter, our new Facebook group, or emailing us directly. Mike, I heard from so many people. It was really awesome just sharing that ride. Some people saying, they've been listening since episode, 80, 50, whatever, and just kind of giving us that back count of when they started. And it's really cool just having everybody along for the ride with us, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was cool to look back on some of our favorites too, because some of the shows we did were great, and I'm looking forward to a lot of cool ones we have coming up.
Yeah, a lot of fun. It was one of our longer shows, about 50 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of our listeners say they're kind of pressed for time. They like it when we keep it to 30 minutes or so, but there was so much to cover. I mean, we're looking back at almost 2 years, but trust me, today we've got an important topic. We got a great topic, but we're going to stick right to the point. We'll try to keep the show nice and short, but we're going to talk about how to move your divot forward. We're going to talk about why that matters. It's something that a lot of people say, they want to do. They see the pros doing it. So that's going to be a fun one, and we're going to dive into that in a minute. Before we get there, Mike, it's so nice to see golf back. I know we're not playing. I mean,
at all.
I can't even conceptualize playing. I run to my car. It's so cold.
I know, exactly. It's freezing.
I drive past the golf course every day and I think, what would it feel like to connect with a ball? Could I even physically swing? Today I think it was 6 degrees and it was something like 4 under with the wind chill. And that's nothing compared to what they're getting something like in the Midwest. I heard about some places that were like 15, 16 degrees, below zero without the wind chill. So
yeah, it's ridiculous. And you're right. I can't think about even driving to the golf simulator. I just don't want to, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to play. I don't want to swing. I'll just talk about it with you for now.
Yeah, right. It's so crazy. But one thing that I've actually enjoyed is looking at some of the people talking online on Facebook and stuff like that on our Golficity page. A lot of guys are having fun just having like indoor putting contests and things like that. Just something to stay active. Lots and lots of people talking about our How to Build a Golf Simulator article on Golficity. And that one's fun. I'm sure there's a lot of guys having some really creative, fun builds. So that way they don't have to run out to the simulator. They can do it right in their own nice, warm home, right?
Yeah, make it nice and convenient.
Yeah, exactly. I was a little jealous. My father got to play last week because he was down in Florida for the week. But I felt a little bad because the first half of his vacation, he was down there for a week. It was like 45 degrees.
Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't it cold? Yeah.
It was cold, but at the end of the week, it warmed up. He got to play 18 holes and he played well. So I was a little jealous. He was, of course, rubbing it in, sending me some pictures,
right.
Which I would obviously do the same. So.
Yeah, well, that's cool that he got to play.
Yeah, and we'll be out there soon enough. But I'm also enjoying watching it on TV. A lot of fun, exciting golf already happening. This is going to be such a big year, if you really look at it, with so much going on. The Olympics. I mean, how excited are you for that?
That's right. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm actually looking forward to that. I'm curious to see how that's going to play out.
Yeah, what's really cool, in a week or two, we're going to have an article coming out on Golficity. I was working with one of the writers. We're going to put out a preview of how that's going to work. Because a lot of people are wondering, because it hasn't been, I think, since 1906 was the last time they had golf in the Olympics. So this is really cool, finding out how it's going to go. But there's so much great stuff going up. The usual majors, things like that. We've got the Ryder Cup. I mean, how awesome is that?
It's cool. And today we saw on Instagram, I think it was either McIlroy or Fowler, Spieth. Someone had that their threesome, their pairing today was, arguably the 3 guys who are going to be on the top of their games this year, competing, week in, week out. So to see those guys duking it out over there, and they're going to be coming back here, it's going to get fun. I'm looking forward to the majors. And you and I, we have to try to get to that major, Frank. It's coming to Jersey. We can't miss it.
No, we can't miss it. We got to just use a pen to write that in on the calendar, because we're going to that for sure. Because so much excitement around the majors. It's just a lot of fun. All right, Mike, let's do a quick word from our sponsor, and then we're going to jump right into tonight's topic, talking about how to move your divot forward. This episode of the Golf Podcast is brought to you by The Motley Fool. Founded with the mission to help the world invest better, The Motley Fool provides simple and easy-to-follow stock recommendations to over 500,000 subscribers. One of my biggest concerns when it comes to investing is making sure I'm investing my daughter's college fund wisely. But like many of you, I don't have the time to spend hours researching the market. That's why I love their flagship service, Motley Fool Stock Advisor. Their newsletter is concise, it's easy to understand, and it gives me the information I need to make investments that make sense. Most importantly, Stock Advisor is crushing the market. As of the end of 2015, the average recommendation is up nearly 200%, versus just under 60% for the measly S&P 500. Past winners include Netflix, which is up over 6,000%, and Priceline, up over 5,000%, plus dozens of other recommendations that have more than doubled. And now, thanks to a special offer for listeners of the Golf Podcast, you can claim a free trial of Stock Advisor and discover the latest recommendations from this stock market beating team. Simply go to golf.fool.com to start investing better. Again, that's golf.fool.com. All right, Mike. So tonight we're going to talk about how to move your divot forward. And this is something that we see a lot of people searching on the internet, trying to find out, and they, using that phrase, like, how do we move our divot forward? And let's first talk about like kind of why that's important and what that means, because reality, what the divot really is just an indicator of how the shot went. And it can play a really important role in the game. I mean, a lot of amateurs don't really understand how divot works and what it can tell about your swing, but pros will really look at that. They'll look at the divot. They'll be able to tell a lot of different things. We talked about this in past episodes about if you see the direction of the divot, going to the left of the target, to the right of the target, and kind of tell a little bit about how your club face is coming through the ball. But here, what we're talking about, let's just first define what we're saying by moving your divot forward. What we mean by that is, let's say you were to picture the golf ball in your stance. It's there on the turf. Now you take a swing. You want to make sure that divot starts after, closer to the target. When I say after, I mean in a direction closer to the target than where the ball was sitting. Okay. And the reason for that is that a divot is left behind when your club tears through the turf. Okay. And the size and the shape of that is going to indicate, what kind of swing you made, through the impact area, how much force you came through with. It's going to have a little bit to do with the club and things like that. But we see it all the time on TV, right? You see, and that's one thing that we see a lot of people want to replicate. When the pros make a really nice shot, what happens? You see that perfect big divot fly. And you're like, you kind of think about it. It's a great shot. And then yet they still take that divot. And then some of us try to relate back to it. And we think when we take a divot, it's like a bad thing, right?
Right.
It's like you feel like you chunked it. So the difference primarily being, the idea being that you want to hit the ball first, divot second. That's what the pros are doing. The pros are making contact with that ball, coming down through the impact area. After they've made contact and the ball is now clear, that's when they make contact with the ground and make that divot. When we chunk it or hit it fat, what's happening is we're actually making contact with the turf before hitting the ball. And there's a lot of bad things that can happen. But if you want to remember, like one thing we hear a lot of people say, is you want to hit the little ball before you hit the big ball. Remember it that way. The little ball is the golf ball. The big ball is the earth. Always try to hit that little ball first. And the problem here, when we say that we're hitting the ground first or making a divot, a chunk style divot, the problem is the second that your club face strikes the ground, it's an incredible amount of friction, right? Because the ground's not moving. You're not going to win that battle. And what happens is it's shaving a tremendous amount of club head speed. And we've talked before about club head speed, how that translates to distance and things like that. But when you make contact with the ground first, you are losing instantaneously tons of club head speed. And that's the reason why the ball doesn't go as far when you hit that first. A clean, crisp ball strike, on the other hand, you're going to hit the golf ball on the way down and then start your divot making impact with the ground only after the ball has been sent on its way. All right.
Right.
I mean, that's something that may make sense to a lot of our listeners who've been around the game for a while. If you're newer to the game, this is the concept that you definitely want to start to get and understand. And there's a lot you can do. If you want to visualize it, just search slow motion swings on YouTube. I mean, there's so many of them. We'll link in the article. We'll link in the show notes too. You can go to golficity.com/episode 101. We'll link to an article that's got a great slow motion video of Jordan Spieth, where you can kind of see, how that, from that side view where you can really see him making contact cleanly. So, before we move on to how we can do what they're doing, Mike, what's your feeling on this? Does that make sense? I mean, what do you find when you're out there? Are you one of those guys who's able to see that nice clean divot, or how's your game fit into it?
Well, I never, I never analyzed it on the course. When I try to practice this, I noticed that a lot of times we hit off the turf mats at the range. Yeah. So I can never really, work on this or focus on my divot to see which way I'm hitting the ball. So that's why I strongly advise guys, find the local course that has a grass range if you can. Yep. Other guys will go indoors to the simulator and they'll get everything they need on the screen, right? That you're going to get from a divot.
Yeah, largely you'll be able to see if you've made contact behind it. And also, you can feel it a little bit with the bounce that'll happen off of those rubber mats. And stick around towards the end of the show. I've got a suggestion for people who are really stuck on those type of mats and you can't get to a grass range. There are a couple different products you can use to roughly simulate it and get that feeling. But let's talk about some of the common causes, the reasons why people hit behind the ball. All right. So remember, when we say moving your divot forward, what we really want to do is just get you making a clean ball strike. What'll happen is the divot will then follow. The divot that you want, that forward divot, is going to happen just from fixing your swing. You're going to stop hitting behind it. So let's talk about some of those causes and reasons why you hit behind the ball and that divot is starting too far back. One thing by far, I would say one of the leading causes of fat shots is when golfers get they get stuck with their weight on their back foot during the down swing. Sometimes we call it the dreaded back foot. So if you're a righty, that's going to be your right foot. If you're a lefty, your left. And the problem here is when your weight stays back on your back foot, your center of gravity remains behind the ball. And what's going to happen there is the club is inevitably going to reach its bottom point. It's going to ground out too soon. It's going to hit the turf. So if you've been struggling with the fat shots like that, you might want to see and get a feel for, are you hanging back on your right foot? Remember, we've talked before about that shifting your weight, shifting it forward, and where almost 80% of your weight should end up on your front foot. So for a lefty, that's going to be for a righty, that's going to be your left foot. But weight shift in general is a big thing. We've covered it extensively on golficity.com. We've had a number of different teaching pros write about it because it is something that's so important. We talk about balance being another thing. But first thing is first, bring your awareness to that. Get an idea and see where your weight shift is happening. The best way to fix this, just make sure you're engaging your hips more actively when you transition. And remember, that transition is a slide. It's sliding through with your weights transferring from your to your front foot. What you want to do is the backswing is finishing up. It's your hips that really jump into action and lead the way through the ball. So if you turn those hips towards the target, make sure we talked about before that belt buckle facing the target. That's what's really going to help making sure you're shifting. If you want a little bit more physical feedback, you can try things like the Skills, SKLZ, weight transfer and timing tool. That's a very simple tool that I like. I like stuff that's just very simple feedback. All this really is it's kind of like a clicker. It's almost like stepping on a clicker, and think of stepping on that for a righty, your right foot, and it just kind of giving you that immediate feedback of knowing, have you shifted your weight off of it? Because if you do, you lighten up on the little spring and you get a click and it just kind of tells you that you've moved. Whereas if you're hanging back, you're kind of stuck there. Another thing that I like, just in general, a quick, easy way to do this, just set up a camera, have your buddy hold a camera face on view, and then just take a look and watch yourself in slow motion, or you can even be in full motion. It doesn't really matter. It's just a little easier to identify in slow motion, and just take a look at your swing and look at what your body position is. If it looks like it's leaned back at impact, you're leaving too much of your weight behind, versus the other way where you're moving forward. But I don't remember where I got this, but somewhere along the way, I remember a pro saying that if you hit a really good shot, you should almost feel like at the very end of your swing, you're ready to just, like, your momentum's ready just to take a step towards the target. because you've turned so much of your weight towards that, towards the target, towards that lead foot, that the almost natural thing you want to do next is just bring your foot, your back foot towards the target and just start walking towards the target. Versus the other feeling, if you were hanging back and you're falling back, you're not going to feel like you're moving towards the target. You're going to feel like you're falling away from it. So that's one big thing. Make sure you're getting that weight shift down. Make sure you're starting with good balance, and just get that off that dreaded back foot, and you'll find that you're going to be grounding that club out a lot less often. Make sense?
Yeah, I'm always videoing myself from the back angle.
Yeah.
I have to do this now because I've never actually paid attention to that weight shift or to see if I'm moving at all. I feel pretty still. I normally feel pretty still all the way up. I always just feel like everything is perfectly in place, but maybe I'm wrong. So I'd have to check that out.
Yeah, and try it with a couple different clubs and different ranges, when you're practicing, because some of us will be really good at it, at moving our weight with some of the bigger clubs like a driver, and then we'll end up with a lot of these fat or hitting behind it with the much more lofted clubs, wedges and things like that. And a lot of the reason is because we're kind of subconsciously focusing on trying to like scoop or lift that ball into the air, which is not what you want to do. We talked about the physics of it before. Still hitting down on the ball and letting it ride up the club face. That's how you're gonna get that backspin. That's how you're gonna get the height you want. But the tendency a lot of times could be like a subconscious tendency to scoop the ball, and that's where we're going to end up behind it. So I would definitely encourage you, try to get an idea and see which clubs you're hitting behind the ball most with, and then videotape yourself with those. And that would be, like I said, the face on, versus when you're videotaping behind yourself, that's called down the line. So it's a great way to take a look at it.
Yeah. You know what? One of my favorite drills to do is still, and I do this even when I'm standing in my office, I do the whoosh drill with the backwards club.
Yes.
Maybe 10, 15, 20 times if I'm just standing there, and I'll do it over and over again. I'm trying to, work that with my tempo. So I don't know if this can help with this situation, but
I think it certainly can. It's the whoosh drill. We talk about making sure that you hear that whoosh sound right where the
right at impact.
Yeah. And if you start to notice that you're hearing that max whoosh, back behind where the ball would be, that's telling you something. And you can kind of just visualize it. If your weight was left on your back foot, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
Or the other thing that can really cause this is the other thing that I want to talk about tonight, where people should do their best to avoid, is that's an early release. Poor balance, like I said, that's the leading cause of fat shots, but an early release is really blamed for a number of those poor swings as well. It's also called casting. I'm sure you've heard people refer to it as casting. And this is what happens when you just release the club too early. And what's going to happen there is you're going to a lot of times end up hitting the ball fat or hitting behind the ball, and your divot's going to be too far back. So for a right-handed golfer, an early release would mean forcing the right hand down towards the ball before the rest of your body's had a chance to clear through the hitting area. And on the article that I'll link to in the show notes, you'll see a really great graphic just kind of showing this with a stick figure of what a cast would look like. And they say cast because it's a lot like, casting
right.
with a fishing pole or something like that. But you want to make sure you're not, and this is another thing you can really help identify with that same type of video analysis of yourself. Just take a quick video with your cell phone and then try to slow it down and just see when exactly you're releasing that club. And if you look at the pros, man, their release is so late. It's unbelievable. And in a good way. I mean, that's also that lag we talk about. And that's why those guys are making perfect contact and then digging into the turf after that. So a big way to avoid this comes down to just trusting your body and just pulling everything through the hitting area effectively and nicely. A good golf swing is one that the hands pretty much just go along for the ride. That's a great way to think of it. Your body's going to be rotating aggressively towards the target. Mike, I talked a lot about this in the last couple episodes, how this is my biggest focus from, I'd say, mid-season last year through the end of the year, and it's going to be the thing I jump right into in the beginning of the season. I said a big indicator for me is if I feel my arms and hands, I feel like they've done any work, I feel like I've done something wrong. Right. To me, the arms and the hands are there just to kind of hold the club as I'm just using the torque and the twist of my body just to pull them through. When you start kind of like push and start with your hands first in your downswing and forcing them down, a lot of times that leads to casting. I always say, envision in your mind, we've all seen it before in the commercials, Titleist commercials, whatever, those machines that hit the golf balls.
Right.
If you notice, there's nothing really happening with the quote unquote arms that hold the club. They're just there as just with pivot points that just hold it. So if you were to liken that to a person, there's no muscles there, right? All the muscles, in this case being hydraulics, are located in the turning mechanism, which is where the hips would be, hips and legs. And all that's doing is pulling that golf club through and whipping it around and hitting the ball. So what they're doing, they're simulating a really good golf swing, and that should show you something. I always find that I learn better with visualizations, and I use that visualization a lot. So that's one thing you can do, making sure those hips are turning and firing. Not only will it help you with the balance that we talked about a minute ago, but also with getting rid of that early release.
Yeah, keep in mind, these guys also have the strongest core muscles in any sport, I would think. Yeah. Well, in most sports.
And that's also why a lot of times we can look at some of these guys who look like they're not big,
right?
You know what I mean? And they're crushing the ball. Well, it's because of the fact that they've got a strong core. They've got just really good mechanics. Same thing with a lot of pitchers in baseball. They're not going out there with like crazy biceps, but some of these guys, if you look at them, so much strength in the legs, in the hips, and just turning and pushing off. So it's a very similar thing there.
Yeah. So, all right, back to this casting. So there's got to be ways we can kind of work on this. Aren't there some devices out there? Have you ever used that Tour Angle 144?
I have. I fooled around with that a little bit. I like simple, easy to use, quick physical feedback devices. I don't like gimmicky stuff. The Tour Angle, it looks gimmicky when you first pick it up, but it's not. It's a very simple device that you kind of hold in your hand, and it's got this, for lack of a better word, it's got this little plastic thing that'll poke you when you start to turn that wrist. So if you're casting, you're going to feel this thing poke you. It's going to give you that immediate feedback really early. If you don't want to invest in anything, another, you can do a simple drill you can do here to help prevent casting, without any device to help you, is just for a righty, go out to the range and just try hitting a couple shots with just your left hand on the club. For a right-handed golfer. So just your lead hand. It's only your top hand. And you're going to find is you're going to be forced to swing through that hitting area without triggering an early release. Because a lot of times the early release is caused by the follow hand, the top hand, the right hand for righties starting to push that club down. So if you're just going out there and just smacking a few shots with just your left hand, you're going to start to get that feel for the one-handed shots. And then bring your right hand in and that drill should just start to give you the feel that you should feel when you get that early release out of your motion. Mike, have you ever tried that at the range?
No, I have not tried that, but I jumped ahead while you were talking to talk about the next product you're probably going to mention, and I'm totally about to buy this thing right now.
Right?
Sorry. I'm sorry to cut you off there.
I had to tease it, but it's really kind of ingenious. I just actually came across this recently while doing a little bit of research for this show, but there's a couple people who make it. One I like is called the Fairway Pro Divot Simulator Golf Mat. Simple, right? Simple, little ingenious thing.
Simple, yeah. I love it. You actually has a handle to carry it.
Yeah.
To the range.
Right. They got to make it super easy for you. But what it does is it's kind of a smart thing. Like we said before, mats, it's very difficult because if you hit behind it at all, your club is going to bounce off that rubbery mat. You're going to connect, midway through the ball. And it doesn't always give you the visual feedback that you're going to get from, or even the physical feel that you would get from real turf. And if you were connecting behind it and where your divot is. So for people who can't get out on grass range, this is a good thing to try. And all it does, very simply, is it's a piece of the normal type of fake AstroTurf turf that we're used to seeing, but it's got a mechanism that'll slide forward when it feels any physical contact. So this way, it almost just like how the grass will move forward and peel up and fly off. This doesn't peel up and fly off, obviously. You'd have to buy a new one every time. But what it does is it shifts forward to kind of relieve that pressure. And I like it. I like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You can see, if it slid forward, and if you get that good ball flight, it's the second best thing to actually physically seeing your divot.
Now, how loud is this thing? What do you think?
It depends on how hard you smack it, I guess.
There's a video. I'm not going to play it now, but I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, definitely check it out. But one thing, and if you want to take note of just something that'll give you a quick idea of what I'm talking about here is watch any of the pros on the range. Obviously, they're always going to be on real grass ranges. But if you look how they set up shot after shot, they'll just be kind of moving that ball up right on the cusp of where the last divot was. And as they're playing, they're just making that divot longer and longer and longer on the range. But It's amazing how consistent and steady it stays. And that just really shows you they're perfectly making that contact with the ball first, then the ground. Small ball, then big ball. Just keep that in mind, and you'll do well. You'll do well. So make sure you get that weight off your back foot and eliminate that early release. I guarantee you're going to start to make better contact. And what you're going to start to see is those divots moving forward, fat shots being a thing of the past. The main thing I don't want people to do is go out there and intentionally trying to make a divot, some in a certain spot. Instead, focus on your fundamentals, focus on solid ball contact. The divot will just kind of follow. Remember, the divot is an indicator. That's the most important thing it is. It's an indicator that things went well with your contact. All right. So those are the most important takeaways. I know that's something I want to work on. I've got a grass range local here that I can try to get out there and work on. For me personally, that's why I brought it up. Wedges, higher lofted clubs are where I find I have the most trouble. They tend to dig in. There's a lot of other things we could really get into, talking about things like bounce. If you're not working with the proper bounce on your wedges, sometimes they'll cut in. But no matter what's happening, if you're making solid contact with that ball first, it won't matter because you're going to make contact with the ground after the fact, and it's not going to affect your club head speed at all.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mike, anything else you have before we wrap up the show tonight?
No, all good stuff. Just more to add to the practice, which is good because the more the better. We got a few months to prepare. You know what, Frank? I might actually go to the simulator this weekend. You don't live as close to me as you used to, but I might just go for like an hour and a half, play a whole round of golf myself so I can work on everything and just put the headphones on, not be bothered.
Yeah, why not? Because
how cool, yeah.
Get out there and just be swinging the club and just staying limber.
Yeah, because I want to work on this stuff. I want to work on a lot of the stuff we've talked about over like the last 8 to 12 episodes, and I don't want that to kind of, fade away as we sit inside. So thinking about doing that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you know what? We're supposed to get, I think, like 6
more
to 9 inches of snow Saturday. So even more better, just to escape it however you can.
Exactly.
All right. So before we wrap everything up, I just want to mention again, one thing that's we've been kind of really enjoying over the last couple of weeks is we recently launched a new Facebook group dedicated to the golf podcast. We've had a lot of fans just joining the group. It's free. You can just search the golf podcast on the group section of Facebook. Really cool. Just getting everybody talking. It's a good way to find out about new episodes because we post them there when they go live. Good way to connect with Mike and myself. We're both in there. We actively talk, and it's really been the reason it kind of reminded me is because when we posted the 100th episode, we had a lot of people sending us congratulations and things like that. So it's great. It's a way we can kind of have a two-way conversation instead of Mike and I just speaking into these microphones each week. We can hear back from you and we can kind of start to engage. And it's great too because a lot of podcast, listeners connect, and you can talk to each other because obviously people share things in common with their progress with the game. And it's great too because we post polls from time to time, ask questions about future topics, who you'd like to see on the show, what you'd like us to talk about. So definitely check that out. I'll link to it in the show notes as well, but just, go to Facebook. Like I said, search groups, search the golf podcast or golf podcast. You'll see us and then just join the group and we'll get some great conversations going. Other than that, thank you everyone, as always, who's left us those great reviews on iTunes. If you haven't had a chance to do that, definitely, if you don't mind, take a second, leave us a quick review. We love hearing them, and it's a greatest way for us to really grow the show and have new people find out about us because we really want to expand the show in 2016. All right. So that's everything we have. Thanks again for listening. Remember, you can get to the show notes by going to golficity.com/episode 101, and we'll be back again next week with more. Talk to you then.